Welcome to the Find Creative Expression podcast, conversations about art and creativity. I'm your host, Sarah Crawford, author, musician, and playwright. You can find the show notes and other information at findcreativeexpression.com. And let's get going. Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 1 of the Find Creative Expression podcast. This is coming out of a website that I run called findcreativeexpression.com. I used to do these creativity interviews on the website, and I thought it would be fun to just kind of revamp those interviews as a podcast. I know so many interesting artistic and creative people through, the various things that I've been involved in, bands that I've been in, theater that I've done, playwriting apprenticeships from writing groups and YouTube, just all sorts of outlets. And I thought it would be fun if I could just sit down with these people and have conversations about art and creativity. There's so much dividing us right now. There's so much negativity in social media and in the world in general. I thought it would be really good to have a podcast where we can focus on what unites us. And I really think art does that. Because maybe you don't create art, maybe you're not a writer or a singer or a painter, but, you're probably creative in some way. And I know you love music or movies or books or TV shows. I mean, everybody either loves art or is creative in some way. Some people craft, some people like to sing karaoke, some people like to color in adult coloring books or children's coloring books. I mean, no judgment. Anyway, so this podcast is going to be a place where I can do that. I want to talk to full-time artists and artists that have day jobs, people that consider themselves to be hobbyists, just all sorts of artists and creative types. So coming up a little bit later, I have an interview with New Orleans poet Bill Lavender. And right now I'm going to get into what's going on with me artistically. So I thought that it would be fun if I shared my artistic journey with you as part of this podcast. I have a day job. I'm not a full-time artist. Technically, I am making a living full-time being a writer because my day job is a digital content strategist, but I write a lot of web content and, not very artistic stuff. So that's one of the things that I want to explore on this podcast is how do you find the balance between having a day job and being creative and being artistic? Most artists have a day job. I mean, there are tons of writers out there who are not Stephen King, so they need some kind of day job to survive. So then it becomes a question of how can I fit creativity into my life? Okay, so I've got a lot going on this month. First of all, I'm starting this podcast, as you may have noticed. It's coming out every other week. I might up that to every week if people really like it. You never know. Then on the 14th, I'm going to be playing an acoustic set, and some songs on my keyboard in my living room, and I will be live streaming it on Facebook and YouTube. Now, this might not sound like a huge deal, but it actually is a pretty big deal for me because I haven't played a show. I used to be a very active singer-songwriter and in bands in Atlanta, but I haven't played a show like that in about 6 years. So I know this is just going to be in my living room, but it feels like a big deal to me. Then on August 18th, I have a book coming out. It's actually my first traditionally published book. It's coming out with the Parliament House Press, and it's called Time After Time. It's a young adult time travel book that takes place in the 80s. So it's, pretty much just a lot of fun. It's not as serious as the things that I typically tend to write, but it does explore some deep themes and have some really poignant things to say about family. At least I hope they're poignant. I guess we'll see. But one of the most exciting things to me about this book is that I'm going to be getting an audiobook. Now, that's going to be later, probably like October, November-ish. But I love audiobooks. I listen to them all the time. So I am super stoked to finally have, one of my books in audio format. I'm also really excited about the narrator. She is really good. Her name is Lacey Gillerin. So definitely check her out if you like audiobooks. So I've had a couple of super exciting things happen for me over the last couple days. I have a trilogy of young adult urban fantasy books called The Muse Chronicles. Every book in the trilogy is named after an M83 song or an album. M83 is one of my absolute favorite bands. Well, it's not really a band. It's really just like one guy who's super talented. But I recently made these books available on all retailers and not just Amazon. And I made the first book, We Own the Sky, permanently free. So I posted on Instagram announcing this, and Anthony Gonzalez, who is M83, he shared it on his Instagram stories. And he has like 80,000 followers. So that was a really big deal. I even got some book sales out of it, and, I got a lot of new followers and a lot of engagement. It was really cool. Then today, there's this company called BookBub, and they send out emails about free and discounted ebooks to, they have a mailing list of 10 million people. Now that's including all genres. So, I've been trying to get a BookBub featured deal, appearing in these emails for years, literally. Ever since We Own the Sky came out in 2017, I've been applying. I've never been selected. But today I was actually selected for a featured BookBub deal, which is a huge deal. That email, it's not going out to all 10 million people, but I think there are about 1 million people on the young adult list. So that's going to be some really great exposure for me and my books. And the main reason I'm telling you all of this is because I think it's really important that we as artists and creative people celebrate our wins. So those two things were very big wins for me this week. So that's what's going on with me. Let's go ahead and get into the interview. Hey, I'm here with Bill Lavender. Bill Lavender is a poet, editor, and publisher living in New Orleans. He's the author of 14 books, including the verse memoir Memory Wing, and most recently, My ID. He is the founding director and editor-in-chief of Lavender Ink / Diálogos Books, and the co-founder of the New Orleans Poetry Festival. So, welcome, Bill.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being the first guest on the Find Creative Expression podcast.
Okay.
So when did you first start writing poetry? Like, how did you fall in love with it?
Well, I started in high school, which was a very, very long time ago. I graduated high school in 1969. And to tell you the truth, I don't remember much about it. I just remember some of my friends making fun of me for the stuff that I wrote and try to share with them. But then I went to undergrad. I grew up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I went to undergrad at the University of Arkansas there. Actually, if you went to Fayetteville High School in those days, you were automatically sort of inducted into the University of Arkansas. And it was just considered to be grade 13. And so I just started looking around, and I saw Fayetteville actually had one of the earliest MFA programs. I found a summer course that was a multi-genre workshop that was open to basically anyone, and so I took it as a sophomore. It was interesting because I was in there with a lot of graduate students, and it was all different genres. The teacher liked one poem, and actually that was all it took to sort of solidify my career.
Well, speaking of other genres, you founded Lavender Ink in 1995, but you only published poetry before 2012. So what caused you to branch out and start publishing fiction and nonfiction?
So I started Lavender Ink in 1995, and my ambitions were fairly modest. So I was just publishing books of poetry basically by my friends. It started out as just handmade chapbooks. And then some people gave me longer books, and I thought these would be better done perfect bound. And so I started kind of getting into the business. Then I can't remember when this was. I guess it was about 2006 or 7. I was working at the University of New Orleans, and they offered me the editorship of the University of New Orleans Press. I took that position, and when I did that, I was suddenly working, as an editor-in-chief almost full time, and learned more about the business, and began to publish kind of a serious number of books in multiple genres. Then when UNO decided in their infinite wisdom that it was time for us to part ways, I just decided that I would take what I had learned working in this institutional setting and try and expand the vision of the Lavender Ink. So I created the new imprint of Diálogos as basically for literature and translation.
So what would you say has been the most surprising thing about directing Lavender Ink?
How difficult it is to sell a book. Yeah, it's although I was kind of prepared for that from UNO Press and from all my experience. It's a difficult business,
It's definitely a labor of love.
Yeah, it's going to be a labor of love. The press now, I've got 130 some odd titles in print, and more coming out every day. And there's some cash flow there, but it's still losing in the neighborhood of $6,000 or $7,000 a year. So it is still a labor of love, even though I've sort of moved into a sort of commercial level. If one title ever hits, then I'll have a year when it doesn't lose money. And it's like the money is sort of it's sort of like a game. If I couldn't afford to lose it, then I guess I wouldn't be doing it. And I do want it to succeed commercially, but on the other hand, I'm not the least bit interested in, just trying to publish something just because I think it might make money.
That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, right. That's kind of a whole different business. I'm trying to make the stuff that I love viable in the marketplace.
So you mentioned Diálogos, which is an imprint of Lavender Ink, and you said it focuses mainly on literature and translation and literature with a cross-cultural significance. Talk a little bit about the importance of telling stories across cultures and having different perspectives.
Back at UNO Press, where we created a series that we called the Engaged Writers Series that was envisioned to sort of politicized and international. And my friend Peter Thompson and I came up with this idea. And Peter is professor of Romance languages at Roger Williams University, and he does a lot of translation.
Right.
And he's very interested in literature of North Africa. And so our focus gradually came to be this the literature of Francophone North Africa, which is, I guess, sort of a post-colonial center of literary productivity. You know, the Algerian War for Independence from France was fought in the 50s, and ever since then, that region has been really, really prolific with like really, really amazing work. When I left UNO, I formed Diálogos as the sort of antecedent to the Engaged Writers series there, and sort of just was trying to do basically the same thing. And it wasn't really envisioned to be only literature and translation, but that's what it has come to be. I was looking on Goodreads the other day. I have a couple of titles coming out right now, and I was thinking to try and promote them on Goodreads. I was looking at reviews of some of the books that I've published.
Oh,
and,
no.
and it was really amazing how horrible they were and how nasty.
Yeah, really Goodreads is known for the nasty reviews.
Yeah, and it just dawned on me then when I saw this. I just said, well, what am I even doing here? Why do I even care? And I don't, I don't.
Right.
It is an extension of Amazon.
Well, I mean, I think negative reviews can sometimes have the opposite effect, depending on what they say. I know sometimes I've been more interested in a book because of a negative review.
There was this one reviewer, apparently female. She had called one of the books that I published by Nabil Fares pure incomprehensible nonsense. That phrase has just been echoing with me ever since, and it's almost something that I want to embrace. I'm sort of proud to be panned on Goodreads.
I mean, everyone is, There are no books on Goodreads that have only positive reviews, like even classic books that you would think, no. Well, so submissions for Lavender Ink and Diálogos are peer-reviewed via a large network of poets, writers, and scholars around the country. What's the most important quality that you look for in submissions? I mean, I know it's subjective,
really,
but like if you had to kind of...
It's also hard to define. It's complicated and it kind of varies from work to work. But I want to see something that is kind of stunning and not something I've seen before. Something that's smart and uses language that doesn't assume the language is transparent and only a means to, sort of getting across a story or a plot.
Right.
And, other than that, I think I look for a kind of an avenue of political engagement that's not always obvious.
Right.
Evidences some sort of like serious thought about the place of language in the culture and in our political culture.
So what do you mean by like in a not obvious way, just like kind of subtextually?
Well, I'm not interested in polemic. I'm not interested in, just sort of political argument. I want to see it connoted rather than denoted, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think it's great that it seems like you're giving voice to, some people whose voices need to be heard. So I think that's really great of you. But shifting gears a little bit, in 2016, you co-founded the New Orleans Poetry Festival with Megan Burns. And this year I saw that you had to cancel the festival and go virtual, obviously because of the pandemic. And there were over 50 videos on the website from different poets and artists. Some of them were really cool. I sat there for a long time watching them. So how was the experience of going virtual with the festival?
I don't consider what we did to be going virtual. What we did really is cancel the festival and merely put the website up for people to, we just put up a facility for people to post really whatever they wanted to, but it was never meant to be a virtual festival, but merely a shadow of what the festival might have been. So what we told everybody is that, we're just going to take because it came upon us so quickly, we were just at the wrong time having the festival in April. Right. AWP had their festival in March, and they were like sort of the last festival like that to happen.
Right.
And so we did not have time to prepare. I was scheduled to go to AWP and canceled it like 1 week before. Then after that, we only had a month before our festival was to happen. And that's the month in which everything fell apart. The mayor here, basically banned, gatherings of, more than a handful of people.
Right.
And so we had to cancel. And so we just canceled and we said, we'll just do it next year. We'll just take the exact same festival and move it forward to 2021. So everybody who submitted proposals.
You definitely have plans to do it in 2021, or, is that still up in the air?
And now we're going to do it in 2021. We just are not entirely sure exactly what it's going to be yet, but we are determined to make it. It's going to be a festival. If it has to be online, then we'll put it online, but we'll try to do it properly. We've been looking into different interfaces and, talking about ways to do it. If we have to do it all online, we've been talking about ways to do it as kind of a half and half. If we can sort of partially do it in person, maybe do some small venue situations that can also be broadcast. I'm not even sure what it's going to be. And actually, we're trying not to get locked into any sort of commitment too early, because who knows, by January.
It's impossible to make any sort of concrete plans right now.
But we are determined to do it one way or another.
Right.
This would be our fifth. 2020 would have been our fifth year. Yeah.
So has that evolved? Did it kind of start smaller?
The first year it was just one day, and I think we only had one venue, but then we had so many proposals and so many people who wanted to come. We sort of expanded into the bar next door, and we pulled it off, and it was fabulous. The big reading on the Saturday night, and it was great. And it's grown every year. It hasn't grown exponentially, which I'm glad of. I think, probably we have about 300 people all total that came the last time we did it in 2019.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty good sized, and we had in the daytime on the Saturday and Sunday of the festival, we had 5 to 6 panels and readings and workshops running concurrently, and then in the evenings we have feature performances with all kinds of crazy stuff. Poets with bands. That's one of our
oh, cool.
One of our nutty things. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that kind of, cross medium sort of stuff going on.
Yeah. I'm sure you do.
So yeah, I definitely participate in a lot of different art forms. So yeah, I'm really into that. So I met you when you were the director of the University of New Orleans low res MFA program, and I learned just a great deal from you about poetry and art in general, and you really just inspired me. So I was hoping you could tell us about one of the teachers who inspired you.
I've had several teachers who sort of inspired me to do a lot of work in a particular semester or year or even period. And sometimes that inspiration was actually negative. I got in trouble one time in the program for telling my students once that if they ever did anything significant, it would be in rebellion against their teacher, not in supplication to them. And I got into the other faculty on the program were so mad at me for saying that because it got around really fast.
I mean, I can kind of see what you mean with that.
Yeah, because I think what the teacher is supposed to do is to bring you to a certain point, and then you go off on your own, And really, it's kind of a catapult like that. And I think that the teacher's influence is always, supposed to be kind of linear. And I mean, you can learn specific things from them, but you have to assimilate that. To put it into your own terms and your own context,
Right.
I guess like the one teacher I had with whom I had the least conflict and the least problematic relationship was Cynthia Hogue. She was my thesis director at UNO. So when I went to undergrad at the University of Arkansas, I took all the graduate workshops as an undergrad. I was sort of momentarily inspired by the teachers there, but rapidly fell into conflict with them. To the point that when I got my bachelor's, they did not invite me to apply to the MFA program. So I left there in kind of a huff. It came to New Orleans for some years, and then finally decided I would go back to grad school, and I would just go to the school down the street, which was UNO. And it turned out that there were some interesting poets there at that time. There were 3 poets there then. They only have 2 now. Cynthia Hogue became my thesis director, and I just learned an awful lot from her and got sort of the right encouragement. It was kind of at a time when I thought I really wasn't going to learn anything. I mean, I just kind of thought I was going to go get this degree and kind of get that over with.
Right.
And I ended up learning a lot from her, primarily because of her. It proves to be a very valuable experience.
So what are you working on right now? Are you writing anything or?
I'm writing a very little bit. The creative process for me is a tortured and it's just not a simple thing. I have all these friends. I really envy them. I have these friends who are of my age and who have retired, and they just kind of sit around and write poetry all day. And
that sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounds nice, but it's not something that I've ever been able to do. I can't do that. The creative process for me is something that sort of erupts sometimes against my own wishes. It's not something that I can say, okay, I'm going to tomorrow morning I'm going to get up at, 7 and write until 9. I can't do that. It's kind of a tortured and laborious process, and I never know when I'm in the middle of it if it's going to work or not. And so when you ask, am I writing? The answer is almost, I don't know. Because, I know I'm working on a few things, but some of them I think are awful, and I feel like they are projects that I'll take for a couple of pages and then just kind of throw away. But then sometimes I do that and I come back to them a week later and I say, oh yeah, all I needed to do is this, and make some little tweak to the point of view or something. And suddenly it becomes something that takes off.
I've written a little bit of poetry in the past. And I mean, I would say poetry definitely depends more on the inspiration, the muse, whereas with fiction, I feel like it's a little easier to kind of sit down and grind it out, every day.
Yeah. I mean, I have a trilogy of novels that one day I'm going to publish. In fact, Todd at Fight and Dival said he wanted to publish it, and all I had to do is send him the final copy of it, and I just can't bring myself to do it. But for me, prose is the same way. There's not that much difference between poetry and prose for me. I mean, there is a difference. It's a different form that I'm working in, but sort of creatively, I go through similar agonies as I approach them.
Right. So are there any, books or TV shows or movies or music that you're like really into right now?
Oh, well, music, not so much. Not that much into music today. I mean, I'm a guitarist and a musician as well as a writer, and so I do kind of pay attention to it. I don't find the music of today that compelling. Interesting in some cases. So in film, I find that there are a few directors who are intriguing me lately. I'll just mention this one, who is Kelly Reichardt. She did Wendy and Lucy. She's just really, really fabulous. And she has and she also did, this fabulous Western called Meek's Crossing. And most recently, another Western called First Cow. She's just an amazing director that's in sort of a completely different style than Hollywood. And as far as my reading goes, I read a lot of fabulous stuff, but one of the downsides of having the press is that I barely have time to read anything that I'm not actually publishing. So if you want to see like my favorite books of the moment, just go to my website and they are there. Except I want to mention one, which is this novel Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. Tanya's Inuit artist. She's most famous for her throat singing. Quite famous in Canada for that, but she just came out with this novel that is it's just amazing. I was just blown away by it. It's called Split Tooth. Really tough and brilliant, and it's sort of a blend of prose and poetry. Anyway, really fabulous.
Cool. I've got kind of a big question. All right.
Okay.
So why do you think art is important?
Important, I guess, is sort of a relative term. I think art is necessary. Let's put it that way. I mean, it has been around sort of from the beginning of civilization or even before. I don't think any of us truly understand its significance or why exactly it exists. But I think it's, so you could look at the world and you could say, oh, art's not important. It doesn't make me any money. But, that assumes a set of values that's no less arbitrary than saying that art is the king. So I think art is just kind of part of the continuum of culture, sort of the digesting the fine points of what's happening.
Right.
And I think it's important to remind us that the things, when you ask that question, why is art important? It assumes that something else is important,
Right.
And so one of the things that art does is it reminds us that really nothing is that important, or that, if it is, or that all things, let's say, are equally important. I mean,
Right.
Art is just as important as politics. It's just as important as money. It has its own role to play, let's say, on the battlefield, in politics, in daily life, in family life, in social relations. It permeates our lives. So it must be important. I mean, it's there, I mean, it's as ubiquitous a phenomenon as any other that we know.
I think that's interesting what you say, that art is, just as important as everything else. I like that.
I mean, it's the thing that teaches us to say, is this important or not? It's the thing that sort of grades everything else on their levels of importance. I mean, to me, it really is the medium of life itself. I mean, it's the way we live and react and sort of process the stuff and give it, in a word, importance. Yeah.
Right. So where can people find you and your work?
Actually, you can. I think I'm pretty easy to find. I'm kind of a web geek, and so I think you just Google me, and I come up all over the place.
What's the Lavender Ink website? It's just lavenderink.com.
I actually bought every conceivable extension. I have lavenderink.com, lavenderink.org, lavenderink.net, dialogosbooks.com, dialogos.com. I'm actually kind of hard to miss, but really just Google me and I'm there. And you can always go to lavenderink.org and there are, contact links and things like that.
Okay, well, thanks so much for, coming on the podcast. Been guest number 1. I really appreciate it.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
All right, so I had a lot of fun interviewing Bill. I hope you guys have all found it uplifting and inspiring. Next episode, I'm going to have New York Times bestselling young adult author Carrie Jones. So stay tuned for that in 2 weeks, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Find Creative Expression podcast. Please take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. You can find me on Instagram at Sarah E. Crawford or youtube.com/Sarah Crawford. Also find me on Patreon at patreon.com/Sarah Crawford to support the podcast for just $1 a month. And that's Sarah, S-A-R-A, without an H. I hope you've been inspired today, and I'll see you in 2 weeks for the next podcast.